Hello and welcome, fellow awesomeologists to Awesomeology. I'm Sue.
And I'm Ben, and in this episode, we're going to pull back the curtain a little to talk about the unique planning process that we call Plantopia. Jazz hands.
Yeah! I realized, I'm going to screw your whole life up here. I realized before we even get into that, and yes, I know I prepared a script. I didn't put this in the script because
okay.
I'm a monster.
It's your world, Sue.
Speaking of monsters, this is going to release on Halloween.
Oh, nice.
So I thought, before we jumped into it, I would ask you a non-topic related question.
Hit me. I'm ready.
Tell me your fondest Halloween memory.
Oh, man. Well, gosh, that's tough to beat. I mean, it's really tough to pick anything other than our son Charlie's first Halloween, just because, they're cute as ever when you put him in. I think that we had, he had like a zip-up sweatshirt that was like a lion sweatshirt, and like the hood had like a mane that went around it and everything, so it wasn't a costume. It just, it's like, hey, you should be a lion because this is really easy for us,
It's all about us.
And I think it was pretty cold that year, so it just like made sense to layer him up in that, and he was, well, let's see, he would have been about a year. He was walking, but walking like a 1-year-old does. So I'm sure we pulled him around in a wagon or something. But so as much as this is my fondest memory, I can't remember the details very well, other than the fact that he was stinking cute, and like so many other things with kids, when you do it with them for the first time, or enjoy those life moments that they get to enjoy, you kind of get to relive them yourself, so yeah, it's pretty tough to choose anything other than that. We're going to be doing Spider-Man themed costumes this year. Charlie got the new Spider-Man 2099 theme from the upcoming Across the Multiverse movie that's coming out in July of 2023 at your local movie theater. But we're super excited about it, actually, and he's pretty jacked about Spider-Man 2099. So Olive is going to be the Spider Pig from that. Yeah, right.
That is awesome.
Pretty awesome, right? Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be creating some more awesome memories when this one drops on Halloween.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Love it.
How about you?
Yeah, no, similar. I was really trying to think of, knowing that I was prepared for this question. I was trying to think of a time from childhood, but really the core memory that I have would be my middle child's first Halloween. Mm-hmm. Because I can remember, what I distinctly remember is it was like 75 degrees that day.
Ooh, yeah.
So it was this perfect, and our oldest would have been 5. Mm-hmm. So he was finally at that age where he could really truck.
Yeah.
So we could go stroller and then a guy really trucking along.
Yeah.
And the weather was perfect. And it just was, we walked miles and miles. Mm-hmm. And
nice.
It was so good.
Yeah.
It was so good to finally, be in that real kid trick-or-treating experience where he was walking up to the door and saying trick-or-treat and, doing the things instead of being dragged by me.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, with kids, it's just extra special for sure. And I guess on that note, and since we're on the topic of Halloween, because I love
why
Halloween.
not?
Yeah, why not, right? Another memory that maybe it is a little bit of a look into my personality or who I am. I distinctly remember the joy I got out of sorting the candy back in the day. You come home with the bucket and then you put all the things together and then you start bargaining with your siblings. I'll give you these 8 Smarties if I get that one Snicker bar or whatever, right? So that was always really fun. And I've actually Halloween and I have had a weird relationship. I remember loving it as a kid, dressing up and stuff. And then probably when I hit about middle school or, early high school or something, I was just too cool for school. And, dressing up was just weird or whatever, right? And so I remember for a while being yeah, Halloween, I don't care, whatever. But then my wife, she loves Halloween, so we've really we've not that we've gone all out every year, but we always dress up and do something. And then with kids, obviously, we're trying to provide the best experience for them. So I love Halloween now, and still love like sorting the candy. And this is another little weird Ben fun fact is I've recently found and gotten confirmation that my favorite part of carving pumpkins is the cutting the hole in the top and doing that as nicely and neatly as I can so it sits just perfect, and being mindful of which way the stem curls and all of those things. And the scooping of the guts and the scraping making a needlessly clean inside of a jack-o'-lantern, like scraping it nice and perfect and getting all the last gooey, stringy stuff and making it just pristine in there. And then from there, I'm like, okay, go ahead, carve what you want. Like like the actual carving of a jack-o'-lantern or face or whatever you're carving into it. I'm like, yeah, I could do without that as long as I get to scrape out the inside.
This pumpkin's
Isn't that
pristine.
weird?
That's what matters.
I'm such a weirdo.
You know what? You are preaching to the choir there, brother, because that is my favorite. And I've never understood, human beings, especially ones I created, that don't get every last string, that do not have that pristine, perfect inside of a pumpkin.
I know.
What are we even doing?
They're the real monsters of Halloween. The people that leave the stringiness inside the jack-o'-lantern.
Right. You got to make that just perfect.
Gosh.
And white.
Yeah.
Just get it.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Cool. All right. Well,
I saw a woman do it with a blender, with a hand blender.
Oh, genius. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I like a good big metal spoon. That helps me get it.
Yeah.
I can dig into it a little bit, get that extra layer off and keep it nice and smooth. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
So we should probably remind our guests what this podcast is about.
Yeah.
Because it's not about Halloween.
It's not about even though it's happening on Halloween. It is about this process that we call Plantopia. And probably the first thing we should talk about is that name.
Yeah.
And then we can dive into the what, why, how, here, there, whatever from there. So why do we call it Plantopia, and can you even remember?
Yeah, great question. No, I can't remember. I remember as much as that, we knew we wanted to do planning and we wanted it to feel different at least and, be different than just gathering around the small round table and looking at a calendar or something, right? We wanted it to be more than that. And so it starts with the name, right? So let's make the name fun. And hopefully that trickles into what we're actually doing and stuff. But I don't remember why Plantopia over Planapalooza or whose idea it was or anything, but also a great name for planning, right?
It's funny you say that because I was sitting here thinking that really, those are our two go-tos.
Yeah,
it was either going to be Plantopia or Planapalooza.
Right. Yeah, for sure. But hey, Plantopia works, and it worked well. But yeah, why do we call it Plantopia? I think it definitely is to just help set the mood for planning, which is important. But we're going to do it in a way that's a bit more creative and fun, engaging, and I suppose that's what we're here to talk about today is how and why we do that, right?
Yeah. Well, and future focused and thinking about ideal world and utopia is the other half of that word, and it just felt really, I think, really futuristic and cool. And
that's probably why we didn't go with Planapalooza, because everybody probably just would have thought we were like having a kegger or something.
Which listen, maybe we
nothing
are.
wrong in that. Yeah, just we want people to know that we're actually working.
Right.
So,
Right.
Makes sense.
Okay.
So, anything else about the origin of Plantopia that you were hoping to recall or make up?
Yeah, no, let's just make up some of the good stuff here. So we've been doing it. How long have you been here? 6 years?
6 years, yeah. And pretty much every year. Maybe, I started in October, so we probably just did some different version of planning that first late fall, early winter, just to get us set for that would have been 2017. But then, since then though, for sure, we've been doing some version of Plantopia.
Right. And the scheduling is deliberately sort of in and around, but before strategic planning and
Right.
right around budget
Yeah.
time.
Amidst
And
budget time, maybe
Yeah.
slightly before if we can help it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And deliberately trying to get sort of a jump on any other planning that's happening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's purpose to all that, right? Like the logical one is budgeting, right? Like, let's get some big, hairy ideas out there in planning, or, at least be aware of some things that have come to mind so that when we have to submit our budget or that first draft budget where, we've maybe got some of those things that we've talked about included in there. And then, I don't know, it just feels right to be first in, as far as, being out ahead of any other planning, so that when we go into those other planning sessions, whether it's organizational wide strategic planning or planning with another department to helping them build out their plan, we've got some ideas already rolling around in our head, some things that we've talked about, so that we can say, yeah, we thought of that first. I don't know, why else do we want to be first, right? I mean, it's more than that for sure, but also there is some value in saying like, hey, we've talked about that already, so let's go,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's distinctive about what we do with Plantopia, which also we should probably get into that and explain that, really is this idea that it's a combination. It's not just strategic planning, it's not just budgeting, but it's all of that in consideration, and then thinking about, what are the sandboxes we want to play in? What are the things we want to do as a marketing team? And if we know things we want to try, then we can connect that to things other people want to do. New ideas, new platforms, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And what do we want to commit to for ourselves?
Yeah.
and agree on.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'd love to talk about how Plantopia is different than planning that you've done before, and you've held, several different positions within the credit union, and your role has changed, and you've seen different departments and stuff. So we should definitely talk about that. Do you think it's helpful to talk, and this is me asking genuinely, I'm not saying this is what we should do right now. Do you think it would be helpful to talk about like what's different about Plantopia, or like what our vision for it was and is and how that's changed, or start with your experience? And it's your call. You can answer that question however you want.
I am going to answer it in Pig Latin.
Perfect.
No, I'm not.
Igpe.
That would be too hard. So let's talk about what it is first.
Okay.
And then we can get to that
Yeah.
poorly placed but pre-scripted question.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the different aspects of Plantopia that might make it a bit different than traditional strategic planning, or that like looking at a calendar, scheduling out campaigns, and I guess that's another thing we should probably mention for the sake of our listeners is we're a marketing team, right? So, as we look at calendars and think about campaigns and stuff, like there is a scheduling aspect that we always have to be aware of. Similar, I suppose, to other departments where there's, ebbs and flows of the seasons, and certain things just logically happen during different times of the year. But, in particular for us, when we have deliverables like creative and all that stuff, like we really need to be mindful of the calendar. But yeah, I think one thing that has made Plantopia different, and we've never done the same thing. We're always like trying to do something different or add a little extra magic sauce onto that stuff, is the food that we order. No, I'm just kidding. It's not the food that we order, but we try to do some kind of brain food sort of thing, right? Whether it's like an experience somewhere, like let's go and learn about this business and what they do and see their operation, and maybe it's something marketing adjacent, maybe not. Kind of like an off-site sort of adventure. Let's go see something that might inspire us, or at least warm up our brains a little bit, right? Sometimes it's something like that where we're interacting with another group, another organization, or it might just be an activity that we're doing during the day. Same thing, same purpose, right? To either create some inspiration that we might not get by talking about precisely what we do, or or it might be something that just is a warm up for our mind.
Yes, all of that. And I think that really brings this a different flavor to what our expectations are for the day, because it makes, I always feel like those kinds of warm-ups or brain food or off-site visits really leave us open to possibilities in a different way. And especially knowing that we go into that deliberately to open up our little fertile brains.
Yeah.
And be ready for the ideas that brings you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because my long-term memory is, I don't know what animal in the animal kingdom has terrible long-term memory, but I'll compare mine to that.
How about a goldfish?
Yeah, a goldfish, right? All that I can recall off the top of my head at this moment is what we did literally last week.
Wow.
Where we, did a cool activity that I don't know. I feel like you should talk about Can It Stand It. I think that was really fun, and lay it out for folks and talk about the why. Like, why would we spend time doing that?
So are we there already? Should we talk about Stand It or Can It?
I don't know. Am I jumping too far ahead?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's an example of a thing that makes our planning different.
Yeah. So I made notes.
Oh yeah.
So,
Should I read the notes?
No, you don't have to know. I'm saying, so what we did for this, and as Ben mentioned, it's a little bit different every year. We always try to make it off-site. That is that's one commonality. The pandemic was a little bit different. We did it a little differently that way, but we were able to be back together and off-site this year, and we broke our day out into 4 sections this time. And those sections were process, culture, output, and goals. And so we tried to start off each half of the day with something that would set us up for success moving into those sort of ways of thinking and the things we were going to discuss. So afternoon was output, where we're talking about the projects that we did, why did we love them, why did we not love some of the things we did, and we had this plan to look at the commonalities of the things that we really loved to do and that were successful, or the things that we didn't love to do and maybe weren't so successful. And spoilers, we found some things that lived right in the middle of that. We loved to do it, but it wasn't successful. So, and then to finish out the day with goals. So we did an exercise that we named Stand It or Can It. It was going to be to love or to leave it, but I did check with one of my professional youths on the team and said, I want to brand this Stand It or Can It. Is that lame? Or is that cool and clever? And Nick was kind enough to say it was cool and clever.
Nice.
So
thanks, Nick.
I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Professional young person. So if you're listening to this and you don't know what it means to stand something, that means you're an obsessive fan of it. You really, really love it. And to can it just means get rid of it.
Yeah.
So before we talked about the projects that we were going to either stand or can, we did a game. You couldn't lose it, which is our favorite kind of game.
Right.
Where everybody got to write down some of their secret stands, their things that they were big fans of that they thought other people weren't. And we put 2 of those on separate sheets of paper, and we lined the rest of the team up behind the person who was sharing their secret stand. And so we would turn around and show the group what the thing was, and then turn our backs to them and let them choose. We had Stand It on one side, Can It on the other, up on the wall, so that people could line up where they were, and gave everybody an opportunity to find out who likes some of the things, some of the weird things we like, find out that we have some convincing to do maybe to like the things that we like. And let me think. So some of the examples were pickled eggs.
Lots of odd foods.
Yeah. We did. We had a lot of odd foods. Pickled eggs, pickled herring on crackers.
Yeah.
On saltines, specifically on saltines, that I remember.
Right. Yeah.
What else?
Cannibal sandwich.
Cannibal sandwiches. That's all I can remember.
Yeah. Well, that's enough.
Yeah. And then TV shows and movies.
Yeah.
And a certain director that someone who co-hosts this podcast is major stan for.
Yeah, it's kind of weird actually, like how. So it's spoiler alert. It's Christopher Nolan. For some reason, it's like I probably will never watch another Christopher Nolan movie and not love it because I'm just like that biased, which is probably not fair. I should be a little bit more critical, but I really have just loved like everything that he's put out recently, and going back actually after knowing who he was and knowing some of his earlier movies, I like them all. But anyways, that's for another episode.
That's the Christopher Nolan episode we'll do later.
But it was really fun and dual purpose, right? Like it warmed us up for the next thing we were going to do, which was stand it or can it for real stuff that we were doing as a team. We got to learn a little bit about each other, learn, about some commonalities that we had amongst each other and everything. And it was just fun, right? And I think anytime that you're doing something like planning, which I don't know, is plan a 4-letter word? I know it's a 4-letter word, but is it a word that like people, when they hear it, they're like, oh God, planning,
Right.
Actually, I should say I was in another strategic planning organization or meeting for another organization over the weekend, our local community foundation, and one of our board members compared strategic planning to a dental visit.
Wow.
Right. Which, his the takeaway wasn't so much like hate it, dread it, I'm in pain, there's a drill, anything like that, but more like, you maybe you do like dread it or put it off or not do it as often as you should and those kinds of things, but every time you do it, you walk away with clean teeth, feeling better, and so there is something about planning that I think is like renewing, refreshing and stuff, but I think some people definitely dread it. I think folks like you and I really like it, not to say that we don't put it off or plan a little late or, anything like that. And I guess I'm certainly speaking for myself on that, but I do look forward to it and I always feel better afterwards. Right. Whereas the dentist, not so much. I don't always look forward to it. I do like the idea of having clean teeth, but that doesn't make me look forward to the visit for sure.
Right. But. Yeah. Well, I think there is something about, and maybe it's not just our jobs, but certainly in our work, there's sort of a chaotic good to everything we do. Like everything's constantly in motion, and we're constantly moving. Hopefully moving forward. We're moving separate little things forward all of the time, and to be able to stop for a day, or like in this case, this year we'll do 2 days. To be able to stop for that time and not be thinking about all of the 7 million things that need to be constantly moving forward at different stages, but to really think big picture, look at the future, think about the past, and try and reconcile those two things and see how you can get where you want to go. That's so that is like a dental visit, in a good way. That excites me so much, and I think also, there's this thing in me, the thing that makes me not able to participate in an appropriate manner in networking events because, the questions I have for people are not, oh, well, what do you do? How long have you all been in business or those things? My questions, well, you witnessed one of them, like, what's your karaoke song if you go to karaoke, right?
Why are you the way you are?
Right.
Yeah, she digs right in.
Yeah. So, how is your relationship with your dad? But, I'm always so much more interested in like the roots of things and to get into a deep discussion about things. And when I have attended strategic plannings that doesn't do that, because I think we probably, we've volunteered for and, worked for other organizations in the past. And sometimes you go into strategic planning and you're like, we didn't really even talk about anything that we could change, we could fix, we could do better, we could improve. Sometimes people come in with anecdotal evidence, biases,
right.
And they come in with their own agenda and say, well, we're just going to increase everything 10%.
Yeah.
And then we're done with strategic planning.
Right.
But that's not strategic planning. That's, I don't math.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. And let's be real, who likes math?
Right. Certainly not us.
Not us. Probably the CPAs on the team do them. Yeah. So, you mentioned, some of the, root cause of things and getting a little deeper. And, I think that's a nice segue into how ours has changed or different things that we've done over the years. And we've done, like one tool that you commonly see in strategic planning is a SWOT analysis, right? And we've had that play a role in our day either by being like a small activity that's contributing to the other information or activities that we're doing throughout the day. Or, recently we've done a SWOT, and that's kind of been the structure that's like informed our whole day. We, really dive into each section of, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats for people that maybe haven't done a SWOT analysis before. But, that's just like one example of how ours has changed. And we're trying to do different things every time that we think about what Plantopia looks like.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I really like, and I think we should right now take credit for say that this is deliberate. I don't know if this is deliberate. But I really feel like every time we go into planning for Plantopia, which also P.S. for anyone who is thinking, this sounds cool, I should do it, you have to plan for Plantopia. It is with the intention of dealing with reality, right? Of dealing with, so it's not this, a template every year that we go through the exact same questions or we talk about the same things, or it really has been a process of where are we at right now and what does that mean our planning should look like? What are the things we need to talk about? What are the things that we think are on people's minds? And what maybe are some of the challenges or barriers we're facing that we need to dig into? And, for this year, I felt like day number one ended up being a much more personal sort of experience for everybody. And which, listen, I think we're responding to the team, the world, the things that we need to do. And if we reverse justify that, man, when can you find a better time than, hopefully coming out of a pandemic, just really this time in the world to think about planning from a really personal place. Think about what, some of the things we talked about, improving processes, getting clarity around roles and responsibilities, talking about culture, and when we talked about goals, we did a recap of some of our goals from last year, our team goals, but then we had a really good conversation about personal growth instead of, jumping right to what do we think our goals as a department should be. Yeah. So I really loved how personal this one was. So
yeah. No,
what do you think?
I totally agree. And I think sure, the timing out of the pandemic and everything is really logical. The fact that we had to do, was our last planning virtual?
Yes.
Yeah. So, our last.
Yeah.
Right. So, just super logical opportunity for us to come together and look ahead and to do that in person in a really personal way, I think is just really logical. Made sense for our team. Might not make sense for every team, but definitely made sense for ours. I think the other justification for doing at least the first session that we did is, and the way that we did it, is for a couple years there, pre or early pandemic. So definitely before the pandemic, but also maybe that first year when COVID first, hit the world. We had some pretty mechanical is the word I want to say. I don't know if it's the right word, but we just had some stuff that we knew had to happen, right? A merger that was coming up, some projects or campaigns or goals that the organization had that there was a pretty clear role how marketing would fit into that. And so we had to kind of come to our solutions with some preconceived notions or ideas or outcomes already in mind. So some of our plan, I think, was, I don't want to say we were forced into it. Maybe I do want to say that. There were just some plans that we had to make more or less out of necessity and not so much out of personal drive, things we, cared about that inspire us, that we like doing. So I think that planning this year really was a first opportunity to balance out some of what we experienced in the last couple of years, which was like COVID forced on us. And when I say forced on us, like nobody else in the organization said, do your planning like this, or
Right.
this is what your plan must look like. But we were just kind of like, forced into a bit, of course sure, in hindsight, we could have maybe been more personal in our previous year's planning, or, tried to have more fun despite the circumstances and stuff. But I feel like we did what we needed to do with what we had available, and now we've kind of created some of that balance with getting back to in person and that personal experience. So, and since we've done Plantopia for 5-6 years now, and it's never been the same, it's going to change again next year, too,
Right. Right. So we should have done this at minute 5, but let's talk about what is it specifically, and then maybe dive into some of the specific stuff we talked about this year. And I think we have an opportunity to tease something for next year that we're going to try here with the podcast. So exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So specifically, it is intentionally an offsite experience. Through the pandemic, again, we had to go virtual. I guess technically we were offsite all of the time at that point.
Right.
So we were never on site. And we have, as it has evolved, and we should also talk about why it evolves.
Sure.
We'll get there. We're going to get it all.
Yeah.
It's a good time. As it has evolved, it has, every different piece of the day has changed every single time. And how we've handled it has changed every single time. But the things that stay constant are that it's an offsite. We try to have the work part of it, keep that engaging, keep it fun, keep people interested, and then also have the brain food part of it. Right. And to really intentionally make it a good experience for people. We don't want people to dread this thing.
Right.
And I think by and large, we've been successful not making it something people dread. Yeah. I think we've had people on the team that dreaded it.
Sure, definitely.
in the past. But, so, I mean, that's what it is. It's a day, full day. I think this is too many details. One year it was 4 half days.
Yeah.
This year, our plan is, we had day 1, which was last week, and it was this big, wide open, expand your mind sort of day. And then we will take what we got out of that day and, hone it down to plans and what all of that means and what we want to do. And some of those things, like talking about those personal goals, those will go into coaching for next year. And we'll be talking about those all year long. Yeah. So that's my explanation of Plantopia in a nutshell.
Right. Yeah. And you've hit some of the constants, some of the, like, maybe we call them non-negotiables, like we're always going to do something offsite. We're always going to have some element of brain food. So some of those things have stayed consistent, even though, there's some variables there too, right? Some things that have changed, besides like the format, the amount of time we dedicate to it, or if it's 4 half days or 1 full day or 2 full days, certainly we've tinkered with the amount of time. And really at the end of the day, that's just all about like, how can we be most effective when we're doing it? If we need 2 full days, and to do those too close to each other means bringing people a bunch of stress and wondering how they're going to get their job done because they have to dedicate 2 full days to planning, well, then maybe we need to try 4 half days, which is a thing that we tried. And, now we're back to, more of a full dedicated day thing, and pros and cons, right? Another thing that has changed a bit is our intentional interaction with other teams during planning, right? Like, I think one of the first years we did it, we set aside an hour, maybe plus, with every other department within the organization to kind of like fact find and get their goals and, talk about what they want to do next year and how we might fit into that, or specific needs from us, right? Just good conversation to have with each team. And then we took all of that and brought it together with our own plans and made a plan out of that. And again, pros and cons, right? There were some things about that were great, like the opportunity to talk with every department head and maybe some people on their team. Really valuable conversation there for sure. But really valuable most of the time, because the thing that we also found, and going back to how we maybe like to do this a bit on the earlier side, ahead of strategic planning, ahead of budget, or in the middle of budget, is that some of the teams that we met with hadn't really thought about next year quite much, yet, so, maybe they've thought about it, but certainly had no formal plans, or we're kind of like building the plane as they were flying it,
Right.
during that meeting with us, so again, pros and cons there, it was nice to have that conversation with everyone, but also I think we caught some people off guard, and,
Yeah.
and admittedly too much information sometimes, you getting that kind of feedback from every single department to try and squeeze that into a plan that's specific enough to us and doable. It was really, really difficult,
Yeah.
So there's a sweet spot, and I don't know if we've yet found it, but we'll keep modifying.
Maybe this year.
Yeah,
maybe this is
year.
it.
Yeah,
Maybe this is the
we'll
one.
see. Yeah.
Yeah. No, with those earlier ones where we were getting all of that feedback, not only did we make ourselves a whole bunch of work,
Yeah.
I think we ended up frustrating ourselves because we went in hoping, with the intention that people would be, if we gave them a little bit of groundwork to look at, gave them, couched all of that conversation for them, they'd come in ready, and that what they would say in that conversation would happen. And then when things didn't happen, or we had some people that said, nope, nothing at all from us, and then had very, very many things.
Right.
I mean, people get to ask for things. That's part of the way that we do our jobs. But
Yeah.
we ended up we created that frustration for ourselves, I
Right.
think.
Yeah. Yep. Totally agree. Yeah. Any other big changes that are coming to mind that are worth sharing?
Man, I think the intention of it has always been the same. I think, yeah, the scheduling roughly
Right.
has always been the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is one of those things, come to think of it, one of the points I wanted to make sure we talked about was this idea that it has changed every single year. And the reason I think it has changed every single year, besides, that idea that we're responding to reality, responding to what we need to do in the moment, is that this is one of those ideas that we know is good, and we are continuing to hone it. So it's something that, hey, man, if you stick with something, right?
Yeah.
And if you think it's a good idea and can stick with it until you can make it work, kudos to you. I think that's something that not just people in marketing, people across every industry think they have a good idea, probably do have a good idea, try and implement it one way, doesn't work that way, or there's wonkiness.
Yeah.
Because P.S., here we're talking about planning. We're talking about essentially a day of just people, right? And inherent in bringing people together is always going to be wonkiness.
Yeah.
So if you say, wow, that, I was grumpy because the pop was warm. We're never going to do that again.
Yeah.
You're not working through to hone that thing until it's,
Right.
doing the thing that you need to do.
Yeah. Oh, such a great point in that, you can come up with a plan for the plan, right? Create activities, give this off-site brain food kind of experience. But man, if you caught somebody, the week after they're dog dies. Like, I mean, that's might not have anything to do with the structure you built, the plan that you're trying to create, or the activities that you're doing. It might just be you caught somebody at the wrong time, right? And so that's an interesting observation that we're kind of aware. I mean, I think we do our best to be, this is empathy we're talking about, right? Like being aware of, what other people are seeing and experiencing and hearing. And, sometimes it disrupts our plans, whether we're talking about planning for the year or how a campaign goes or how something that we create is received, lots of, we should be used to it enough by now that, of course, like that shouldn't surprise me to hear you talk about that. But I think it's an important point to call out for sure.
Yeah. Well, and somehow, and we should talk about this more as we talk about the next phase of this planning and what we do next year. Somehow this year, I think we managed to not fall in a trap that we've fallen into before, which is rehashing a whole bunch of junk, right?
Yeah.
There was something about the combination of conversations we had, the things that we focused on, that we did not end up. There was maybe there were one or two projects but we put them in a place. Like that was these are the things we would can.
Right, yeah.
So they had their place. And in the past, we have this recency bias where, if we have started the day with brainstorming and hey, man, I will take partial responsibility for every single year this happened. Somebody comes in with a chip on their shoulder about something. And then all the rest of the day is like, oh yeah, well, but people do that thing.
Right.
And we somehow this year, the combination of things we did, we just steered right around that in a pretty clean way. So that was cool.
Yeah, that was definitely cool. And I think two contributing factors to how it went this year. One, just the structure, right? Like the Stand It, Can It activity was an opportunity to say, can it? And then let's move on to the next thing. So we didn't have to dive deep. We didn't have to gripe. We didn't have to say, well, that's not going to work because, insert reason or excuse or whatever. The other thing that I think I have to imagine helped was how personal the day was, right? Like a lot of the day was about who we are as people and how we interact with each other. So like you didn't have to get stuck on, well, this didn't work because that person this, or, this didn't work because that thing wasn't on time, or, whatever. It was just more like, let's acknowledge it, learn, and let's move forward because we're all like people that we just talked about are trying to do the same thing, care about each other, care about the organization. And so, yeah. And kudos to you for putting that together, because I do think that structure and the care behind the day is what made it go the way it did this year, for sure.
I hope so.
Nicely done.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. It was fun.
Two other things that are changes that come to mind that I think are just worth mentioning. One was... maybe it's only one change. I don't know. Here we go. We used to just do either the 1 day or 2 day thing scheduled relatively close to each other, or we did those pre-meetings with departments, and then we wrapped all that up into our one planning day. And that was kind of it. I think we've always been a rather agile team, but being an agile marketing team is something we've given more attention to lately. We're learning and trying things and just trying to be more agile. And I think because of that, this year we did mid-year Plantopia, if you remember, right? So not to say that we never shifted plans previously or anything, but this was really, I think, the first time where we scheduled it. Like we said, okay, we're going to do a big check-in halfway through the year as a team and cut some stuff that needs to go, shift some stuff that is new in our world, and just kind of check in and move forward. And through what we're doing through some other quarterly meetings and stuff that we've set up, that's really helped us make an intentional check-in. Because being agile and constantly moving and shifting things around to do what's most important at the right time and with the right people dedicated to it is great. But also every now and then you can get caught up in that because your nose is an inch from the grindstone. And so it's important to also take a step back and say hey, are we still on the right track? Do we need to just do a quick temp check? So yeah, I think that's another big change, just the more frequent planning and like that mindful check-in as a result of that has been, I think, good, and it'll probably continue to change,
Yeah.
or at least like we'll be more efficient as we keep going.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind is, as you were talking about that, I think that contributed to really how we feel differently. You know, we talked as we were planning it about, you know, sometimes we are really like dragging ourselves into Plantopia, and it is like the year has kind of crushed us.
Sure.
And this year, I think we were excited about it. We were feeling good about what we knew, all of that stuff, and feeling hopeful. And I think that is partially because we've been way more mindful about advocating for ourselves, advocating for what we do, advocating, you know, and encouraging the team to, you know, if you're right, you're right. And like with us too, to say, you know what, if this is my opinion, but if that's your thing and that's your responsibility to make that decision and you're right,
Yeah.
don't let me stand in your way.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think having that level, you know, feeling that level of agency and really focusing on things that, you know, like thinking about the culture exercise that we did and talking about culture, thinking about things that not only we want in as we continue to build a culture around ourselves, but things that we can make practical steps towards.
Right.
And feeling really hopeful that, yeah, like let's pick things that we actually have agency over.
Right.
Or that we are going to, you know, we are going to advocate to the people we need to advocate to and say, hey, we're going to take agency here.
Yeah.
Because this is what we need to be happy, healthy, and you want us to keep working, right?
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And for some of the stuff that we don't have the agency for or over, or, you know, the amount of control we have is on the lower end, you know, at least having the conversation and saying like, this is important enough to us. That's super valuable feedback that we need to share, you know?
Right.
So, and if we never make the space to talk about it, then it's certainly not going to go anywhere. So,
Yeah.
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 Cool.
So how would we suggest that other people implement something like this?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. Well, whether it's us or somebody else, like I think a super valuable first step is like talk to someone or let someone help you with it. You know,
What if they called us?
what if they called us? Then
Yeah.
we would say we would love to help
Then
you.
they could call us and we could help them. Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Just checking.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I do think sometimes the outside perspective or somebody to help hold you accountable or, you know, give you the nudge to actually do the thing. Because this, I hope that this all sounds good to some people, but, you know, then it goes away because you're on to the next thing in your day. And it's like, oh yeah, that's the thing I wanted to change for this year. Well, let's just do what we did last year, you know? So,
Right.
so I think accountability, and if that can't happen within, having somebody help you with that, I think is an important first step. You know, I think another thing is one way or another, getting a pulse of your team, maybe getting some initial feedback from your team, like what might be motivational to them. Is there something they're hoping to learn? What do they care about? So kind of, you know, doing, whether it's an actual activity or a survey or something, you know, doing something so that you are getting the voice of the people that are going to be participating in this thing being heard, you know, because if you just plan this day kind of in rogue or in a silo, you could totally miss the mark, and or at least wind up spending time that isn't super effective. And I think that that's why we've made some of the changes we've made is, you know, we've looked back and said, yeah, we can probably do that better. Meeting with each department is nice, but also is that the best use of our time, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, what else? What do you think?
I think it's important to think about this, think about something like this planning as separate, but wrapped around and wrapped into budgeting and strategic plan.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, thinking back to when we started this, maybe there was some concern that this was a little bit redundant for us to do our own planning, and then there's strategic planning and
Sure.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I've never felt like it was redundant,
Right.
especially because it gives us an opportunity to, really turn to everybody on the team and say, like, what do you want? What do you want to do? What are the big projects that you want to try, or what's a new skill that by the end of the year you could have, because we will have tried something that helps you build it.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely there. You can't even measure the valuableness of that.
Right. Yeah.
To give everyone on the team the opportunity to say that out loud and then get supported.
Yeah. And you might need to dig that out of some people, or it might not ever totally come out or come out at all, right? And I think that's something you got to be comfortable with too. At some, there's things you can do to make sure that everybody has a voice and everybody has to contribute. Sometimes that can feel super forced, but if you create the environment where the expectation is you have to share, and they're actually doing that, where they feel welcome to and empowered to or confident, whatever, that's really important. But also, everybody's different, right? So like not everyone's going to be the star contributor that, when you do the activity with the Post-it notes, you get 50 Post-it notes. Like some people might give you 3, whatever. But that's just either who they are, or like we were talking about earlier, the circumstances around them have put them in a place where they're just not feeling it today or whatever. Not to say that's an excuse or anyone should feel left behind, because we definitely want to try and make sure everyone's contributing, but also like you got to be comfortable that it's going to be at all kinds of levels.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, and it was helpful for us. We already know that there are some people on the team who, and you know what? None of them listen to this podcast, so we can say whatever we want.
Whatever we want about them. Should we call them up by name?
We should. We'll include their pictures.
Yeah.
But there are some people on our team that we know are more introverted, that we are watching during meetings, because we know, for whatever reason, something's going to come up that we know they have an opinion on.
Yeah.
But we have to draw it out.
For sure. Right.
So, we're lucky that we go into it because we work with them and do that thing all the time.
Yeah.
That we have that awareness. So, I guess that is good advice if you're thinking, if you're listening to this as an HR person or a training person or someone who is saying, oh, there's a team in my organization that should do this, and I think I would like to present that for them. I would like to handle that for them. We go in with innate awareness to these kinds of things. So that's something to be super mindful of.
Yeah.
Because exactly to your point, to do it in a ham-handed way, or a way that's going to make them uncomfortable, or, something that's going to make them close down,
right,
can be really damaging to the trust.
Yeah. With that person, and then they're put in a position to maybe show a side of them that they really aren't, or that other people might experience and be their only experience with them, or one of few,
Right.
and now that somebody's put in a bucket, right?
Right.
Yeah. Another thing that I think would be helpful for anyone wanting to get started is get some permission, or maybe a better word is buy-in, right? Because this is a time dedication, it's a resource dedication, and it's at least time, but you're also like maybe buying food, or maybe renting a place, paying a little bit of money to have a space or something. Of course, there's ways around that. You can get super cheap food, or you
Right.
can maybe find a place that will give it to you for free or super cheap, or even if it's just in your same facility, but just somewhere that you never hang out or meet. Like just go somewhere different. But sometimes there's a cost associated with that, or the food, and like I said, at the very least, the time. So, if there's someone that needs to be aware of that, make sure that they know that you're doing it, and not just for permission. So I'm actually like really regretting that permission is the word that I use, but buy-in, like let them know why you're doing this, and the value that it'll bring to your team, and at the end of the day, the whole organization. Then you've got support from people that are going to wind up interacting with what the outcome is of your day, the plan, or the conversations that you've had. So don't hide it. Don't hide
Right.
that you do it, because it's important.
And Also, P.S., if you are willing to dedicate the time and capacity to do something like this with your team, and you're going into it with open mind and empathy, and this, you should be proud you're doing this for your team. You really, really should.
Yeah.
Because people, I think, it's a common issue with employees that they don't feel heard, and that every time we do a survey, communication comes up.
Right.
And so this one-on-one opportunity is, it's really, really important, and it helps people to be heard if it's done well.
Right. Yeah.
And plan it. Man, I think we have, every year we've planned it a little tighter. And I think we're just getting into that sweet spot where we know where the bumpers are in that lane.
Yeah.
Right? And you want to plan, but without being rigid.
Right.
Right.
Or planning to create an outcome, right? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to know, here's the time we need to use. We're going to do these activities. We're not going to. We've definitely had sessions of this where we've spent a lot of time trying to pull information out of people, or I don't know, sort of poking at that same rotten tooth.
Yeah.
Until we didn't even like it.
Yeah. You really shouldn't use the tooth or dental analogy.
Yeah.
It's not helping our cause.
No.
This being
Okay.
different. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I get you though. I hear you. Well, if I do say so myself, lots of great ideas there on how to get started or
Wow.
how
How's
people
your
might
ego
use this.
today?
Yeah, feeling
Pretty
really
good.
good.
Pretty
Real
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the one thing we did not talk about, which now we're running out of time.
Right.
So
Rapid fire this. Let's go.
we're going to rapid fire this, and we're going to talk about the. Now I have to remember the name of it. What did I call it? It's the decision matrix.
Oh.
We should talk a little bit about the decision matrix, because that people don't know it, but that's gonna inform 2023
Right.
here on the podcast.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, we should. So, I'll kick us off. You can get
Yeah.
into the details of what it is, how we started that activity, and maybe what we plan to do with it. But I'll just say, common challenge in, I think, any team. Our team isn't huge, but it's also not like a 2-person team. But I think on any team, 2-person team, 200-person team, there can be plenty of opportunity for confusion about where's the buck stop, or whose decision is this to make. And, we usually find that the further down decisions are pushed, the more shared ownership there is, amongst the team, and the more efficient the team runs, the more stuff they get done, as, there's more decision makers that are truly accountable for things that contribute to the whole team by the decisions that they make. So we've experienced this challenge where it's like, is this a Ben thing or a Sue thing, or is this something I can just decide by myself? So to know that this was going to be part of our activity for that day to kind of get to that. I was going to say root, but now I'm just only thinking of teeth and dental. Goodness gracious! But to get to that, clear answer of who's the decision maker, who owns this thing, or if they own the decision or not, what level do they need to be engaged? Do they just need to be aware, or can these decisions be made completely without them? And so really, really valuable stuff. Even if, and I don't think this will happen. I certainly hope it doesn't happen, because it'd be a bummer to look back at that activity as being wasted time. But the worst case scenario is we talk about these things, and we at least get a little clarity on what people care about, or what they feel they should be making a decision on. A perfect scenario, right, is there's clearly decision makers accountable for certain things throughout the whole team. And tell us more, maybe structure and how to do it.
Yeah. So we stole this idea from a book. And I will link to it, because now I can't, right at this moment, I can't remember the name of it, which I should have written down. But it is this process to build an accountable team. And the idea behind it is that there are very few or no really high-performing teams that are non-accountable teams.
Mm-hmm.
And accountable teams know what they're doing, when they're doing it, who's responsible for it, and are able to self-guide and are able to help each other and are able to talk about real issues and move things forward. And this is a process that we are going to work into over 2023 and beyond to try and get us to really feeling like we're an accountable team.
Yeah.
There are a lot of moving parts to do it. And the very first one we chose to do was to look at this decision matrix. And we know it can be confusing because we have a team of 6, and of the team of 6, 2 of us are leaders. Mm-hmm. And the whole creative team reports to me, which makes everything, but obviously everything that happens on the team is Ben's responsibility. If we screw everything up, buck stops with Ben. So, but it's not fair.
What if everything goes really well? Does it still stop?
There's a possibility for that. Then Ben gets all the credit.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Just want to be sure.
Yeah. So, this is a thing that Ben and I have been working on for now like a little over a year.
Yeah.
Because we had to, when I was promoted to oversee that team, we had to start dividing responsibility.
Right.
And I had to take some of that stuff off of Ben's plate and start making some of that make sense, at least in our world.
Yeah.
So what the decision matrix does is it takes all of the decisions that we do. Ultimately, we haven't gotten there yet.
Right.
We have to finish it.
Yeah.
All of the decisions we make, and like down to pretty granular decisions, what we're going to post on social media, what are the pictures we use, those everyday decisions, up to budgeting, hiring,
right.
Those really high-level decisions, and puts them in black and white, and we're able to say who's responsible for those decisions, if it is not Ben or I that are responsible for the decisions, how involved do we have to be?
Right.
So you can rate yourself, rate your involvement on a 4-point scale. 1 being, that's my decision to make, and everybody else can go peddle your papers. 2 being, it is someone else's decision to make, but you'll make it with my input. 3 being, it is your decision to make, but I want to know you're making it. And 4 being, do your thing, use the picture of the funny dog. I don't need to know any of that stuff. So it was really interesting and enlightening to me to see some of the things. You don't really ever think about how many decisions people are making and what is on their mind as far as decisions. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Because we had the team bring all of the decisions they could think of.
Right.
And some of them brought like hyper personal examples. Some of them brought things that were really, company-wide decisions. And we just listed them all out, and we talked, and we put them on that matrix, and we talked about who owns them. Some of them, either Ben or I own, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that is the heavy hangs the head that wears the crown.
Yeah.
Others are team decisions. Others are, we found a few that aren't even really our decisions, but they come out of our department.
Right.
So it was interesting to see it all in black and white.
Yeah.
We have to continue building that matrix because we ran out of time.
Yeah.
And actually, after the day, I went and looked back, I paged through the book again, and he suggests you take 3 hours to do it.
Okay.
So that would explain why in that hour
We didn't get it done.
we didn't get done.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. My favorite part about it was honestly some of the, probably not the right word, smaller decisions that we make that for us to just go through the exercise and say, yeah, that is your decision to make. I don't even need to know about it. How that was simultaneously like a weight off of our shoulders and also empowering to the person who gets to make the decision now, right? So like both sides like really win, like, oh, cool. I know I can just make this decision now.
Right.
And then others are like, free me of that thing, Not because you hate it or anything, but just like,
But
now
let's not take the time.
Why do this? Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the interesting next step will be once we have it all worked out, get everything on there is to talk about the accountability behind those.
Yeah.
So, really to start to have what can be hard decisions, which is, when something doesn't turn out the way that we want it to.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have said, like, that's your decision to make a good decision, make good choices, and it doesn't turn out the way we've expected, well, that doesn't mean that decision reverts back to me.
Right.
Because you made a poor choice. That means you learn from your choice. And we
opportunity to talk, coach.
Yeah. We keep learning and growing. So
yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And something you'll hear more about.
Yeah. So speaking of that, we are very much running out of time.
We have ran out of time. We are.
How about, can you give the elevator pitch for what we want to shift for the podcast for next year, and that
that's so scary. That's like a commitment now.
Well, maybe tease it, and we'll maybe use a first version of that episode to explain more, dive in, because honestly, we might need that.
Yeah. So here's the teaser for this. Building an accountable team is a process, and you don't go overnight being a regular team that you think is high performing until you look at some of the bad habits you have or some of the things that you're not succeeding at, to suddenly being, the most highly accountable, high performing team in the world. There are a lot of habits you have to change. Some of them are very scary habits. I already mentioned, one of the things that highly accountable teams do is they deal with real issues together.
Right.
So that is saying, like, if someone's not doing their job, that's the whole team being comfortable that we have a conversation that you're not doing your job together. It's not, one coworker going to another coworker and saying, you should go talk to Sue and tell her that this person should be doing that thing. That's not how an accountable team does it. So the decision matrix is a place to start.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of other conversations we have to have. And what we're thinking we're going to do is we're going to expand. We're going to share some of that journey with our podcast listeners throughout the next year, and have special episodes. I'm so scared to say this out loud.
It's okay. Do it.
This
is accountability.
Okay, here we go. So we're going to move from one episode a month at the end of the month to doing 2 episodes. One of those episodes early in the month, and we will have to tell you when that will. We have to schedule those yet.
Yep.
Will be all about building our accountable team. And we don't know, it's a new idea, so we don't know what form that's going to take. Yeah. We know we'll be talking about it. We know we'll be talking about our successes, our challenges, our barriers, and things. But if you don't talk about the things you intend to do, especially if it's a good idea,
right,
you don't hold yourself responsible to do them. So that is how we're going to, in public, hold ourselves responsible. Yeah. Sometimes I think we're a little too transparent. You know that?
This is good. No, it's good. Now our audience have been voluntold to be accountability partners with us here.
Yeah, I love that.
And hopefully, all seriousness, will be on the journey with us, right? And maybe learning with us. Maybe we'll be learning from them, like saying, hey, that's a thing I tried and here's how it went. So we'd love to hear some of that feedback for sure. But like you said, we'll see what shape it takes, exactly how things time out, but we've just committed to it. So let's do it. And I'm excited. It's going to be good.
I think that'll be fun.
So more to come on that. We need to quickly shift into our closing segment where we share something awesome, which is our opportunity to share recommendations for things that happen, things we've heard, watched, experienced, et cetera, et cetera. And I will kick us off by sharing, first off, kind of a double recommendation or double share here. I started listening to Smartless, which is a long-running podcast now with Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes. Just started listening to it like a couple weeks ago, which one benefit to being, one, driving as much as I am nowadays, and 2, being behind on a really awesome podcast is you can just listen to it all the time. So I've been listening to it a bunch. Plug for that one. I absolutely love it. It's super hilarious, so much fun. But the one I actually want to talk about is something that I stumbled upon in listening to the Smartless episode where Anderson Cooper was the guest. And he, you got to learn a lot of cool stuff about him and his family, which is absolutely unbelievable. And I knew none of it about his mother being a Vanderbilt and just this like fashion icon. Just unbelievable story that Anderson Cooper has that I knew nothing about. But he also talked a little bit about a new podcast that he was starting called All There Is, which is all about grief. I actually, for some reason, listened to an episode this morning. We were recording this on a Monday, and I listened to it like while I was getting ready this morning after most of the family had gotten out of the house. And it just... I don't know. Grief is this weird thing that, like we don't talk about or fully experience as Americans because we're like afraid to talk about it and stuff. And it's weird. And like, so I lost a brother in 2002, and, my experience with grief around that has like changed over the 20 years that he's been gone, and will probably change until I die. Right. But, just hearing Anderson Cooper talk about his grief and his experience with the death of his dad when he was young, a brother when he was really young, and just some of the like similarities of like these milestones and moments that happen in your life when something tragic happens, whether it's death of family or, anything else that might put someone through the experience of grief. It was just really interesting to hear some of the similarities and like, oh yeah, I totally experienced that thing too. Or, so like one example is he talked about, actually, no, I'm sorry. On the episode, he was talking with Stephen Colbert, who also has, some interesting, previous experience current experience, right. With grief and, losing he lost his dad and two brothers really suddenly, everyone really young. And he talks about how life before that moment is kind of difficult to remember. Like all of his memories are kind of like pieced together. Like I kind of remember that part of my life or whatever, but it's just not a clear, vivid memory like everything that's happened since then, And so just really interesting because I totally have that too. Like I actually like kind of struggle to remember things that happened in high school and middle school and stuff. And sure, that was 20 years ago, so I'm sure that's part of it. But also, there was this big thing that happened in my life that gave me new perspective and awareness of my emotions and the world that I think has changed the way that my brain remembers things. So just one experience that he shared that, this is, we're talking about grief here, which, like I say, we don't really like to talk about because it can make us cry and make us sad and stuff. But it's also like super interesting and just something that, easier said than done, like we need to be comfortable with, and like it needs to be a part of our life. It's part of the human experience. And so anyways, if you've experienced some grief, it's probably a podcast that you'd get some great value out of. And if you're I don't even want to say lucky one, because I think, like I said, grief is part of the human experience. But if you haven't experienced anything huge like that in your life, maybe listening to it to prepare you for when something does happen, because guess what? It's gonna. Yeah. Something's gonna happen in your life that's gonna just crush you. Maybe listening to the podcast prepares you, or at least gets you in a spot where you're willing and open to accept grief, because it's just an important part of life and being a human. And it's beautiful. That's the thing, I think, is it really is beautiful, but it takes some time and awareness to get to beauty with grief, as opposed to hating it or dreading it, So I went way deeper on that than I really wanted to, but All There Is with Anderson Cooper, we'll share a link. It's awesome.
Very good. Very good. Another thing, as long as we're thinking about grief, this was not the recommendation I planned, but just wait until you see how this all ties together.
Yeah.
A book that I read over the summer called The Orphaned Adult. If you lost a parent or both parents, was really eye-opening for me. So I would definitely recommend. And it's a super short read, but if you are still sort of working through that grief, it's a tough one.
Okay.
But but really, really good. The Orphaned Adult.
Got it.
And I'll share a link to that. And it really does. So I usually try and recommend something that people can actually get involved in, like a book or a podcast. But this time, I had just a very exciting moment, but it actually does relate to grief because my dad has been a hobbyist with Model A Fords, like my whole life, and I'm going to keep it together here. I'm okay. So he had three of them sitting in his garage and in various different states of disrepair. And my mother passed away. And when she was sick, they had a conversation, and she said, "Whatever you do, you don't get rid of those cars," right? But so she passed in March of 2021, and for 18 months he didn't touch them. And they were, and he actually built a whole other part of his garage so he would have room to have 4 cars in a garage. So they weren't really in the way, but he didn't touch any of them for like 18 months. And one of them had been running, had some problems. He was frustrated. He was depressed. He didn't want to do anything with it. And finally, he started to have a little more interest in life. Things, he just started to get a little like puttery with things. And we kept encouraging him, work on the car. Because the one was so close. Yeah. There was a problem with the rear end and the steering and the radiator. But it was fully assembled. The other ones aren't fully assembled. And we finally convinced him, because I think he felt like, number one, what's the point of anything? Number two, there were just enough things wrong with it that once you start, he's just going to get frustrated and depressed and he didn't want to do it. Yeah. So we offered to buy him a new radiator for Father's Day, I think it was. And P.S. new radiators for Model A is very expensive. But, and that ended up being backward. We didn't have to buy it anyway, but that's not the point. The point is this. We helped him, my brother and I, and my husband helped him a little bit. Like taking the rear end off of a car is a little bit of a project. Yeah, and he's 78 years old. And and he puttered around with it all summer. And he finally, I gave him, we give each other a lot of grief in our family. And one of the things started giving him grief about was that he always let my brother drive his cars. And I never got to drive one of his old cars. Now, I am a chaos goblin. I understand why when I was a teenager he didn't let me drive his car. It makes total sense to me. But I'm not a teenager anymore, and it was always like one of those things that I regret. And for the last couple of years, I was like, yeah, that's probably done. I'm not going to get a chance because he's not going to work on them. Yeah. So on Saturday, he got that one. It's a 31 Ford Touring, in case you wondered. Nice. And he got the final things done on it. He put radiator fluid in it. He put gas in it. He started it up. There was a tiny little leak, which he fixed. Yeah. And I got to drive it on Saturday just to put it away, to store it for the year, because now we got it running. Now it's too late to do anything with it. Yeah. So that was a long journey to get to there, but that was my experience to get to, and they're super hard to drive. Compared to there's nothing about
because like no power steering or anything.
No power
like that,
steering.
Right? Yeah.
The brakes are casual.
Yeah, right. So you got to like stand on them.
Yeah, you have to really stand on the brakes. The pedals are different. Well, no, I drive a standard transmission. My own car is a standard transmission, so that I'm used to. But what I didn't know is that when you shift, so this is a 3-speed. When you shift, the transmissions are just made so differently. every time you go into gear, it grinds the gear.
Okay.
So every time it's and so that's
Yeah. Takes some getting used to, I'm
dicey.
sure. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and we topped out at 35 miles an hour.
Oh, flying.
I know. So
That's awesome.
that was my experience. It was great.
Yeah, super cool. That's great. So maybe I don't know, we're gonna get like a picture or something?
I did take a picture
Okay.
before we put it away, so I can share that picture.
That'd be super cool.
It's a beautiful car.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, friends, thanks for hanging in there. This was a long
All
one
6
for
hours
sure,
of this
but
podcast.
yeah, but all good, we hope, and really excited to see how this planning conversation and what we have in store for next year helps guide some new episodes into next year too. So
Yeah.
stay tuned for all that.
And speaking of the picture that I'm going to share and some of the links we talked about and information on the books, which I poorly remembered, we will share all of that, and you can get that wherever you get your favorite podcasts, because we hope that we are one of your favorite podcasts. So go to your podcast app, or you can always check out all of that information and a little blurb about every podcast and other things that we have going on right on our blog, and that is exclamationqso.com/blog.
Very nice. Thank you, Sue. And thank you, friends, for tuning in. These are your self-proclaimed professors of awesomology, Ben and Sue, reminding you that life's awesome if you make it awesome. We'll see you next time.